Guide, we beseech thee, Almighty God, members of the Senate, that they may wisely deliberate for the good of this country and for the glory of thy holy name. Honorable members, please join me in the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Pleasant and warm good morning to you all, distinguished senators, both sides of the aisle. To all those in the gallery, thank you for following in first person the proceedings of this House. And thanks to all those of you online following. Senate is resumed. Senator Seville Francis has requested the floor. You have the floor, madam. As the opening batswoman.
Thank you, Madam President. Allow me to begin by acknowledging everyone present in this honorable House this morning. Madam President, beginning with you, my colleagues on the other side, my distinguished colleagues who are here to join in the support of this bill that we are debating this morning. Madam President, before I lend my full support to the proposed budget, which will continue to transform and advance our beloved nation, allow me to begin on a note of gratitude. First and foremost, Madam President, as we all know, this is my first budget debate. And this is only made possible because of the trust and confidence placed in me by a great leader, the Honorable Prime Minister Dickon Mitchell. Prime Minister, allow me to thank you for allowing me to serve the remarkable youth of Grenada, Carriacou, and Petite Martinique. Most importantly, Madam President, in all things we know they are impossible without God. And I am eternally grateful, in a more special way more than ever this morning, to the Almighty for not just allowing me to be here, but I thank Him for calling me to be a servant with purpose and granting me the opportunity to restore my health, to be here today in His honorable House. Madam President, life is very uncertain. In honor of International Women's Day, because we are still in the month of March, under the theme Accelerating Action, I was on my way to present to a group of young women in St. Andrew about one of the social ills that's plaguing our community, our society, Madam President, on gender-based violence. When I encountered some health complications on my way to St. Andrew, Madam President, I was actually driving. Now, we could have all been here today singing a different tune, reminiscing on my contribution and my time short-lived in this honorable House. So today I stand with a different sense of pride and purpose. And Madam President, I also want to publicly commend Dr. Acosta, a young female doctor, and her team at the Princess Alice Hospital, who, with professionalism and dedication, attended to me. Their service is a testament to the potential within our nation, and I encourage them to continue being the best versions of themselves, particularly because everyone on the team, both male and females, were young people. And oftentimes we hear the negative comments about our healthcare practitioners, Madam President, but this morning I want to publicly acknowledge them and thank them for having me here today. Towards Vision 75, Grenada, Resilient and Rising. Madam President, as we embark on the journey towards Vision 75, we must recognize that our projections and plans for the upcoming fiscal year were not haphazardly assembled. Instead, they were carefully crafted to align with our National Sustainable Development Plan for 2035, the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and our government's midterm action plan. I must stress this, Madam President. A hurried bird never builds a proper nest. We must build strategically. This 2025 budget builds upon the successes of 2024, ensuring that our transformation agenda remains steadfast. And Madam President, I would love to stand here and reminisce on all the achievements that we've had for 2024. But I think the record sets that straight, Madam President. And so I am going to build on what we've achieved and show how, because of those achievements, we're moving steadfastly ahead in 2025 under this budget presented, Madam President. Madam President, this morning, with your help and your permission, I would like some assistance to have something distributed in this honorable house.
What is that something?
Madam President, it is a key, and it is very significant. And I would really love if you can assist me in allowing this to happen.
It relates to your presentation?
Yes, Madam President.
Permitted.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I have a spare key for everyone in this house, Madam President, and I would like for it to be distributed. Madam President, I also have my key. The name of this key is called Context, Madam President, because context is key. I have sat in this honorable house, I have listened to the other place, and Madam President, one of the things that I found baffling is that the contributions were lacking context, which is key, particularly from the opposition side, Madam President. So I decided, you know, in the other place we have a minister who is a plumber, maintenance man. He has been unclogging pipes, Madam President. But in this house, consider me to be the locksmith of this upper house, Madam President, because the spare keys I will share today will unlock the doors financed by this budget as we focus on key priorities. Madam President, of the concerns raised by the opposition is the reduction in the budget allocation for the Ministry of Youth and Sports. This has become the other side's kumbaya, Madam President. It is their hymn, their go-to song. Madam President, context is key. Historically, the ministry functioned primarily as a program-driven entity, often inflating budget allocations for programs that ran on autopilot with little sustainable impact. Madam President, you know they say when you marry into a family, you get all the baggage that comes with it. And so we have inherited a ministry driven on programs, Madam President. We must shift our focus to impact-based budgeting, ensuring that funds are directed where they will create measurable, sustainable development for our youth. Madam President, the reallocation of resources does not mean that young people have been neglected. There is youth in every sector, Madam President.
Correct.
Madam President, the Ministry of Youth is not a sector. It is a pillar that fosters the necessary things that our young people need. It is not a sector. But our young people have been made to believe that without the Ministry of Youth, there aren't opportunities present in this country for them. And that has to be changed, Madam President. Whether it is education, social services, or agriculture, our young people are engaged across the government. Madam President, let me draw your attention, and we have our dear Sister Gloria here, Madam President. And under her ministry, for example, the 0 to 60 Real Quick program was launched in October of 2025 to help young people adopt healthier lifestyles and plans financially for their later years. Madam President, this is just an example of how strategic reallocation is ensuring a long-term impact. So this is not happening under the Ministry of Youth, but it is catered to the young people of our country. And I want our young people to understand that the Ministry of Youth is only here to facilitate them and to ensure that the other ministries have policies and programs in place across the sector to ensure that they benefit the way they need to, Madam President. Madam President, context is key. The restructuring and redirection of funds are not cuts. I want that to be made abundantly clear. The restructuring and redirection of funds are not cuts, Madam President. They are strategic alignments. They are strategic realignments. Let us examine how key programs continue to align with our national agenda. Madam President, I will start with the Empower 4.0 program. The key priorities for this program focuses on boosting youth education and training access. Under the National Sustainable Development Plan, it falls under the Strategy for Enhanced Access to Quality Education and Skills Development. For Vision 75 policy, Madam President, it seeks to expand access to technical and vocational education and training, higher education and skills-based learning programs. Under our MTAP, or Midterm Action Plan, it increases scholarship and training programs for youth. Under the Sustainable Development Goals, it falls under goal number 4, quality education, expanding access to education and training, and goal number 8, decent work and equipping youth for employment. Where am I going with this, Madam President? Remember, I said context is key. Now, everything we do must align with what we are working towards to develop our country holistically. Madam President, this program design, I want to start with the registration aspect of it. And let me tell you why. Now, we are in 4.0. From 1.0 to 3.0, this is how the registration process worked. I want you to follow where I'm going with this. A list was provided from the constituency office to the ministry with a list of persons to be enrolled into the program. Madam President, we know under the previous administration, there was no distinction between constituency office and party office. So we weren't sure whether the list came from the party office or the constituency office. Under the 4.0 program, Madam President, this is not how it worked. Open call system so that every young man in Grenada, Carriacou, and Petit-Martinique can benefit from this program. That is transformation, Madam President. Madam President, I also want us to see the difference between the 4.0 program, the version. Now, under the previous administration, the stipend was 800 EC dollars. At the end of the program, they would receive $1,200 as a savings and then the government will match the $1,200 with the exact amount, totaling it to $2,400. Madam President, under this administration, the young men have spoken to us, and we have listened, because we listen. And through listening, we have increased their allowance from $800 to $1,000, Madam President. On top of that, in hand, they are getting $900. We hold $100 for them, and at the end of the program, they get $1,200. Madam President, that $1,200 is not matched equally. We are now giving them an additional $1,800 at the end of the program, which totals their amount to $3,000, Madam President. Apart from that, we have a transition period where their hands will be held. So no longer will resources be wasted, Madam President. So we're not just buying tools and storing it there or giving it to them. And in some cases, Madam President, we're not sure it was going to the right people. So here's what. Because we are not here to waste the government resources. So what we have been doing under the Empower program, the staff, they are well equipped and trained. They will be holding their hand, walking them through the procurement process. Because we believe, Madam President, that while you teach a man to fish, you also have to give him fish to eat. That is the only way if he's not well nourished, Madam President, he will not be able to receive the training of the fishing. So they will be assisting them with the procurement process, going with them, showing them how to use the invoices, how to do all of that. So it's not just a case where the program comes to an end and we say goodbye to them. There is a monitoring and evaluation process, a follow-up process. We ensure that our young men are particularly empowered the way they need to be. But Madam President, the most important part of this program for me is the prison version. And I'll tell you why. A report from the prisons manager who facilitates the Empower program there indicated to us that the men who enrolled in this program has never became repeated offenders. They have never seen them return to the prison, as opposed to those who did not enroll. Madam President, that is something for us to be proud of. Furthermore, I would like to highlight that Trinidad has launched the Empower TT program, and the Honorable Shamfa Kojo Lewis praised this administration and praised this program, this version, the 4.0, indicating her interest to model their program after ours as they seek to improve. Madam President, that is something to be proud of. Madam President, I want to use the Osprey shuttle real quick just to run up to Carriacou and Petit Martinique, because the Honorable Leader of Business on the other side mentioned, and I listened and I took notes, mentioned that there's a cut in the Empower program for Carriacou. Madam President, let me explain. There is a difficulty in implementing the program in Carriacou and Petit Martinique, and for very good reasons. The program was designed, Madam President, to one, upscale the young men who are not gainfully employed. Madam President, the young men of Carriacou and Petit Martinique are actively engaged and employed. And they have said to us at our Youth Talk series particularly that we don't need the Empower program. What we need is to become professionalized in the skills that we already have. So how can we become certified? And that is why we have shifted our focus, because we cannot have a one-size approach across the board. This is not what they need. And I want to, through you, Madam President, ask the Honorable Leader of Business on the opposition, to give this message to the young men of Carriacou and Petit Martinique.
Correction for the record, it's
Leader of Government Business. Leader of Opposition's Business. Sorry.
We are not changing governments in the Senate.
Yes, we're not. Thank you. Madam President, thank you for the correction. But I still want to convey a message. I still want a message to be conveyed on our behalf. From the government, I want the people of Carriacou and Petit-Martinique, we want them to know that we are proud of them. So we say big up to the young men of Carriacou and Petit-Martinique. Madam President, I move quickly to the Elevator program because it mirrors the Empower program, obviously because it is targeting the females. And it falls under the same pillar that I listed for the Empower program. Now, this program will address the challenges young women are facing, and that will help to bridge the labor market gap. Training will be provided in training in literacy and numeracy, life skills, and business development. It will serve to equip the young female participants with nationally recognized qualifications to secure job placements within the private sector or provide startup grants as business support. We already have over 200 young women registered, and we are just waiting to roll out officially and launch the program. I want to move now to the National Youth Ambassadors Program, which, as a key priority, falls under youth and community engagement. Under the National Sustainable Development Plan, it falls under increased civic engagement and participation in governance. Under Vision 75, it promotes youth-led initiatives in civic engagement, volunteerism, leadership development. It promotes youth leadership and involvement in nation building. Madam President, the participants in this program again answered an open call. We had hundreds of young people applying to this program. Currently, we have over 80 participants currently enrolled, and that includes Carriacou and Petit-Martinique. And they were selected by an independent selection committee. No biasness. Madam President, the selection committee ranged, the professionals on the committee, they ranged with different background and expertise. Currently, the youth ambassadors are undergoing a series of training by our very well-equipped Deputy Consul General at the Consulate General of Grenada. Madam President, no brain drain here. We are utilizing our own. Madam President, furthermore, they will participate in the National Youth Ambassadors Symposium on the role of youth in CARICOM and UN SDGs ambassadors. Additionally, Madam President, the constituency core of the youth ambassadors will receive $5,000 grant funding to undertake sustainable projects. And I stress here, sustainable projects. Those projects will be vetted to ensure that they meet the criteria as we follow the procedures and guidelines that we are emulating, which would be the Sustainable Development Goals, etc. And they will be collaborating and networking to execute the advocacy pillars. Madam President, the pride of my heart, the program of the ministry that I admire more than anything else, without shame, the National Youth Parliament Program. Madam President, it falls under the same pillars identified for the Youth Ambassadors Program. Again, it began with an open call. Madam President, we all know that I am a product of the National Youth Parliament Program. The only difference is, well, not the only, because there are many differences. So it started, and everyone who answered the call had the opportunity to sit on the parish level. We had an independent committee of judges assessing the top 3 debaters from the parish sitting had the opportunity now to become candidates for the national elections, youth elections. Madam President, we had 27 candidates from 14 constituencies, and we had over 2,000 young people registering to vote for these young people. Before the representative from Carriacou and Petit-Martinique mention it, I will just say it. No, they are not involved because it was around the same time of Hurricane Beryl's passing, and because of that, we had to ensure that they are given a fair chance. So, Madam President, they are currently preparing in Carriacou and Petite Martinique to do their local sit-in, and from that, the candidate will be selected and they will get the same process. They are not totally eliminated from the process. Madam President, this program catered for males, females, persons of different religious, political persuasions. It didn't matter. Tout moun bagay, it doesn't matter. Inclusivity was key in this program, and they will be serving a 2-year term. Happy am I to announce that they are also getting a monthly stipend. Madam President, this is way better than my time. We were lucky to get a snack box. Madam President, this program makes me very nostalgic, for many reasons. Because I understand the struggles that those of us who worked and participated in the National Youth Ambassadors program before, our Youth Parliament program, went through. Madam President, every time I think of this program, I get emotional. At one point, 3 young, brilliant minds, including myself, were expelled from the program, Madam President. And the reason that happened is because all we asked for was a meeting with the then minister, because we wanted what the program is now to be then, and we wanted to sit and discuss how that can be possible. Madam President, we were referred to, and I quote, as a bunch of disgruntled youths. Madam President, I recall the very first sitting we had in this honorable house. I was one of the lucky persons when this building was officially opened to sit here as a National Youth Parliamentarian. And Madam President, the day before that sitting, when the list of participants were provided, and my name emerged as the Prime Minister, I was looked dead in the eye. And Madam President, I make no lies about this. And I was told, you are not good enough to be the Prime Minister. Madam President, I was daunted, I was broken, but I believed in proving people wrong. And so, Madam President, the following day, I came here, I stood in this honorable house and I delivered. When I was finished, the same individual approached me and said, you are remarkable. Can I have a photo to post on Facebook? Madam President, why did I share this story? Because you see, when you don't have the right youth representative behind you, it is very easy for young people to go astray and to start belittling themselves and not believing in themselves. Madam President, and I'm asking myself, how can you stand in an honorable house and say that you are for the young people? Madam President, you cast us aside. So I want to say to the young people of our dear nation, through you, Madam President, that whenever anyone approaches you and tell you that you can't, do not get despondent. Do not be dismayed. Instead, look at them just like I did and said, watch me. Madam President, I move now to the Community Grant Fund, because we're focusing on how this budget will help to move our agenda forward. The Community Grant Fund is designed to enhance collaborative advocacy and community development of sustainable goals and projects. This fund was derived from research and consultation. Madam President, I like to call this fund Passion Meets Support. Throughout our Youth Talk series, one of the common themes that we heard was, we have these ideas, but we do not have the financial backing to support it. So, Madam President, we have listened, and I am happy to announce that a total of $225,000 will be disbursed in the following way. So we're going to have $15,000 per constituency project group. And when I say constituency here, I'm not talking party. $5,000 for youth parliamentarians, $5,000 for youth ambassadors, $5,000 for youth groups, and we have over 40 youth groups registered. Madam President, those projects, again, for transparency and accountability and for bias-free selection, we have an external selection committee to ensure that the projects are well implemented. Madam President, on top of that, it would not just be a case where projects are being implemented. There will be training, project management and implementation training, Madam President, because remember I said sustainable projects. So we will have those training to ensure that the implementers of these projects are well equipped with the knowledge that they need to ensure these projects are sustainable. Madam President, I move now to the Youth in Business program, which for the Vision 75 policy fosters innovation, entrepreneurship, and youth-led business ventures. Madam President, oftentimes when programs are developed, they most times cater to those who did not complete education or looking for second chances, etc. But the young people who are steadfast and head-on, and they're doing great things and need that support, they have cried and we have listened. And we are here to dry their tears, Madam President, because we now have the Youth in Business program. Yes, it was there before, the Youth Biz program, and we're all good with that. But Madam President, as with everything else, it needs upgrading, and we have assessed and we are moving forward. And I am happy to announce that we have loans. Well, our partners in this would be GDB and GIDC. So we have loans catering up to 50 people at $30,000 max for startup and established businesses at a 1.1% interest rate, 7 years to pay back, and a grace period of 6 months. We have grants in the amount of $3,000 per person, catering for 50 people max. However, you must be registered with the Division of Youth. The pillars that are funded are ICT education, manufacturing, tourism, healthcare, and agriculture. Madam President, I am also happy to announce that the previous Youth Biz participants or business owners, this government actively supports them, and we utilize them as service providers whenever the Division of Youth have activities, and that must be commended, Madam President. Madam President, I move now to the green elephant in the room, and I want to change career for a second, because I remember our Prime Minister spoke about there is greatness in every Grenadian. So I feel like I can have multiple careers around here. So I started off this morning as a locksmith. And Madam President, I move now to become an optometrist. And I'll tell you why. Because it's either one, we have persons in the other place and probably in here with blurred vision. So Madam President, I have worked with different lenses in case anybody needs, including 3D, Madam President, because sometimes the lens needs to be changed in order to see clearly. Madam President, I want to speak about the new Imani program. I have heard it from almost every contributor in the other place, and I'm sure it is going to be brought up here. So let us address the green elephant in the room. Madam President, where do I start? Start from the beginning.
You start wherever will help you end in the rest of the hour.
Madam President, I am very mindful of the time, no worries. And I am very much guided by the standing orders too, so I know what it says. Madam President, I want to begin by replying to the Honorable Member on the other side. And permit me to quote, in their deliberation at our previous sitting on Tuesday said, "The program gave a false sense of assurance, saying the program gave a false sense of assurance is a false statement. And the honorable member went further on to quote that there is a $14.2 million cut in the budget. Therefore, Madam President, what message are we sending to the young people? The youth have been abandoned with little to no engagements. End of quote, Madam President. Don't duck, put up your head. Madam President, through you, I ask, what were the program objectives? Madam President, how many young people were enrolled? How many transitioned? Madam President, the false hope was given to the youth first by the then administration. Madam President, the budget was cut for multiple reasons. And that is why I ensured to cut a spare key to remind you that context is key, Madam President. Madam President, we had young people joining the program at the stipulated age. And Madam President, years after they're still in the program. Madam President, a bachelor's degree is just about 4 years max. And we have people longer than a bachelor's degree duration in the program. Madam President, we had mothers in the program, their daughters finishing secondary school and meeting them in the program, Madam President. Tell me if that is not a false sense of hope for our young people. Is that the only thing we're telling our young people where they can become gainfully employed? Madam President, I don't want to use the word employed when I'm referring to the Imani program. It is a training program that transitions you into permanent employment. And if that is not happening, it means that you have failed your objective and the program is a failure. Madam President, that is the reason why assessment is key. And with assessment, you either improve or you cut, Madam President. Context is key. Madam President, let me tell you this. $700. Imagine a mother in this program for $700. Thank God this administration moved the minimum wage to get something else, Madam President. It moved to $1,200, something that is still not sustainable. But being guided that it is a training program and it is a stipend, we could understand why. Now, if this is a salary, then that is a shame on any administration, Madam President. Madam President, we had approximately just about over 2,400 persons on the payroll. Note what I said, on the payroll for this program. And it is being said that we sent home young people and we cut the program. We did no such thing, Madam President. Let me tell you what we did. We asked the young people in the program to reapply, re-register, because we needed to manage our data management system. Madam President, after the registration, it went down to just about 1,500 participants. Can you guess why? Madam President, up until this month, it is less than 1,500 young people. Want to guess why? Context is key. I'm getting there. Madam President, we have managed to secure over 343 permanent placements for training and over 50 graduated from the scholarship program portal. Madam President, let me explain to you. Now, if these young people have transitioned into permanent employment, you see how the stipend payroll goes down, Madam President? So do you see why there's a need for the budget to be cut? Madam President, remember I said context is key. If they're regularized or for other reasons, they're no longer there. There's no point in exploiting the government costs. Madam President, the budget must reflect a decrease. Madam President, do the math. Do the deduction and we will see where the budget cut is. Madam President, that was wastage, not prudent fiscal management. Madam President, this needs to stop. Madam President, one more thing on the Imani program before I proceed. I looked at the document, multiple documents about this Imani program because I needed to understand the context, Madam President. And section 3 of the policy document named Policy Plus Procedure said, the minister, remember who developed this program, Madam President, context, key. The minister shall approve a final selection list for youth and a copy provided to the program manager and the officers. The minister decides who the Imani trainees are, and then that is given to the program manager, not a bottom-up approach, a top-down approach. We could see where I'm going with this, Madam President, and if you cannot see, I have lenses. Madam President, this is not a cut. This is a realignment. The program was restructured to ensure meaningful engagement and a transition into sustainable careers, Madam President. I am happy to announce also, read the Imani program, that we have been in consultation with the private sector, giving them a mandate that these young people have been exploited, and that's my word, not the words of this government. Exploited. Because you have been using them for all these years, which means, one, the position is vacant. And if the position is vacant, then you have what I would call a moral obligation to no longer consider them to be trainees. So what has been happening, Madam President? The private sector has been using these trainees, Madam President. But the government is paying for that labor. Madam President, I hope you see where I'm going with this. And that is the reason why we have made sure to engage them and given them a time period to get their finances in order, to put them onto their budget, onto their payroll, or else we will do what we have to do, which is take them and get them elsewhere. Madam President, this is an administration that believes in the young people and giving them what they rightfully deserve, Madam President. Madam President, I want to talk on the Project Fly because it was mentioned, not because it is an active program, but I want to bring clarity. It was mentioned in the other place that when we came in, we cut good programs. Madam President, I am saddened to announce that Project Fly flew away like Super Flying Fleet. Madam President, when this administration came in, we have no problems with continuing programs, but Madam President, we could only continue a program if we have the data to back it up. So I ask, if you wanted the program to continue, where is the data? What happened to the files? Answer this question. So when you stand in the government to do the government business, tell the people the truth. We need the data. We have no problems continuing a program, but we cannot continue it without the comparative data. Madam President, I don't know if it was, sure I did, I don't know, Madam President, but I'm just saying. Madam President, I move on. Madam President, in the interest of time, I am very much mindful of the time. There are other programs in different sectors and ministries targeting the youth. We have Grenada Office of Creative Affairs. We have endless scholarships right now, and it's no longer scholarships where who I know. And the Lincolology Scholarship, Madam President. It is scholarship that can come open for every young Grenadian to take advantage of, and not just the young one, but I'm representing the youth. So, Madam President, it is there, and I know Honorable David will elaborate on that. We have the Youth in Agriculture program. We have the FAO programs with CMOS production and other areas. We have the cybersecurity training. We have the Youth and Mental Health Caravan upcoming that will address these gaps by bringing the information to the young people with key stakeholders. Madam President, we have plans for the young people. But I want to say to the young people, do not be despondent by what is the narrative being pushed out there. The help is there, the opportunities are there. They are not just within the Ministry of Youth. They are spread across central government. Madam President, in the interest of time, I want to make mention of, and in person's spare time they can look at it, some of the output and the outcome achievements that I'm super proud of for this ministry. That would be output 3, 5, 10, 11, 14, and 15. The document is available online for everyone to see. Outcome number 7 and number 10. Reasons why I am so proud of this administration, and I stand proud to support this budget put forward by our Honorable Minister for Finance. Madam President, mental health is near and dear to my heart. For those who know and for those who don't know, I am a mental health advocate. I am a mental health coach. I work with persons with mental health challenges outside of this realm, Madam President. And so, when an entire ministry dedicated to mental health was established, I was ecstatic, Madam President. This is something that we are to be proud of, Madam President, because we know if the head is affected, nothing else works. And in order for us to have a productive sector, we have to ensure that our mental health is intact, Madam President. And this is what this ministry is designed to do. Another area on the mental health that I am proud of, the mental health policy. I mean, it's just in draft stage, but at least we are taking the steps in the right direction. Madam President, statistics have shown that suicide completion usually affects, in the bigger countries, the elderly people most. Unfortunately, in our little neck of the woods, it is quite the opposite. And Madam President, before I go forward, I want to send my condolences to the most recent victim of suicide completion, Madam President, particularly because it is a young woman. And so I pause just for 5 seconds to acknowledge the fight and the struggle of this young woman, Madam President, because I think it is important. And this also shows that now more than ever, this mental health ministry is prudent, Madam President. So you see, under this ministry, the focus will be on improving access to comprehensive mental health services, providing continuous training to staff to enhance service delivery, providing and strengthening the legislative and policy framework governing the mental health system, increasing mental health literacy among the population to combat stigma and misinformation. And that is key. Because once we have an educated nation on mental health, it will make it so much easier on our statistics to go down. Now, one suicide completion, Madam President, feels like 100 to us because we are a small nation. Madam President, the integration of mental health support into primary health care, that is important, and that is a focus area because, one, it will decrease the stigma and discrimination of persons. So no longer do you have to go up to the mental health hospital and somebody seeing you going up there and being, labeled and stigmatized and shamed, but it is accessible at our primary health care facilities. That is commendable, Madam President, and that is a focus where this budget will be going. Madam President, the infrastructural development on the mental health, the Maribor Rehabilitation Center, that is needed more than ever, Madam President, and we have seen that this has already started, and that deserves to be commended. Madam President, it would be remiss of me to stand here and not speak about sports, and I am also mindful of my time. No worries. Madam President, I want to move to sports development and infrastructure. You see, we recognize that sports are integral to national transformation, community development, and economic growth. The 2025 sports budget is designed to empower communities, develop talent, enhance sports governance, and improve infrastructure while aligning with Grenada's Vision 75. These efforts will contribute to a healthier, more active, and globally competitive sporting nation. And Madam President, we know we have talent in Grenada when it comes to sports. That is undoubtedly questioned. This budget supports parish-level sports development at the grassroots level, upgrading of sporting facilities, lights at Progress Park and Massachusetts playing field. Madam President, I also want to go back a little. I heard mention on the other side in our last sitting on Tuesday about the cricket stadium, and we have a state-of-the-art cricket facility and we weren't able to secure any cricket games. Madam President, remember I said earlier, when you're married into a family, you inherit everything that comes with it, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Madam President, how were we able to secure cricket games with the state of the facility that we met? That is the question. Remember, I say context is key. It is important for us to secure games, yes, but it is also important for us to maintain our high standards and to maintain our good name, Madam President, because we cannot have people coming in to play cricket under these conditions. So we prefer to not accept it, cut our losses, refocus, and come back, Madam President. Madam President, talent identification and training. So we're going to have youth sports, festivals, school competition, and professional coaching. Physical literacy and health awareness, because we need to encourage an active lifestyle through structured programs. Capacity building of coaches and officials, certifications and skills development. And as our Prime Minister said, we are investing in the most important capital of our country, the human resources, Madam President. Through the National Sports Council, Madam President, the key objectives for 2025 include to reduce physical inactivity by 15%, to increase girls' participation in sports by 35%, to expand community sports program by 25%, to enhance parish-level sports development, to improve sports data gathering and archiving. That's a challenge we have in Grenada, documentation, Madam President. So oftentimes when we're doing research, we always have to, most times, reference other places and other people. But this here will fix this problem. Upgrade to sports infrastructure. Train and develop sports professionals. And the key policy references to achieve this would be, 1, our NDC manifesto, which speaks to establishment of a National Sports Council. And we have done that, Madam President. Check. Madam President, under the National Sustainable Development Plan, we have strengthened communities, reduced inequality, and promote social justice through the National Sports Council. This will be achieved. Madam President, under the MTAP, to reduce poverty and improve living standards through sports. And under the Sports Council, the National Sports Policy, it's something that is now in effect. And that is why we were able to see our sports enthusiasts and our sports ambassadors receiving the tangible financial benefits that they deserve. Madam President, last year in November, Dr. Kirani James has received his payment. Madam President, we had Lyndon Victor, we had Anderson Peters, we had the Paralympians being rewarded, we had the chess players being rewarded, Madam President, and that is because our national sports policy is in full effect. Madam President, might I add that the promises that were fulfilled in November were promises made to them under the previous administration, Madam President. We keep our promises on this side of the table. Madam President, we have some program activities also under the National Sports Council. So we have grassroots development. We have the parish councils to lead sports lead sports growth through leagues and training, and the staging of the 2025 National Holiday Recreation Program, something that we are all looking forward to. We are also going to be do infrastructure development, which would increase access to safe, gender-equal facilities with lighting. That is important. Safe, gender-equal facilities with lighting. Obviously, we need to build the capacity of our people, especially those in sports, and so there will be training for sports administrators, coaches, referees, and medical staff. Madam President, that is so important because at the last Olympic, we had our Dr. John representing and leading the medical team, and she was highly praised over in Paris for her exemplary work. This is a daughter of our soil, Madam President, and we want to ensure that we have more like her who could be recognized internationally. So we must ensure that these things are in place. Madam President, we have some special initiatives like the table tennis development that is aided by China. We have the youth empowerment and development where we will be expanding the youth entrepreneurship in ICT, the blue economy, and renewable energy. Sports inclusion in education. So we will have closer collaboration with the Ministry of Education to enhance physical education in all schools. And for the budget allocation, it will be divided across 5 key areas which will, under the Sports Council, which will be the National Sports Council Administration, the National Sports Council Programs, the Parish Sports Council and the Parish Sports Council Administration, and of course, infrastructure development. Madam President, Madam President, I don't need 7 minutes, but I can take the full 7 minutes. Plus 15 minutes, because I want to get accustomed to the number 15. Madam President. Madam President. Madam President, I don't know about to go there to get 15 because lately we're seeing that declining drastically. Nevertheless, Madam President, this budget is not just a financial statement. It is a manifesto of transformation. Madam President, it embodies the principles of Vision 75, ensuring that we are not just keeping up, but we are rising above challenges. And before I fully conclude, Madam President, it would be very, very remiss of me to not acknowledge the students who are in this honorable house this evening. Madam President, I stood here representing their future. I stood, and the teachers, because without the teachers, you know, you guys are very important. We appreciate you guys. And I know you can tell that we appreciate you teachers because we have done what we said we need to do, right? Madam President, I also want to acknowledge the staff of the Division of Youth and the Division of Sports, the Ministry of Youth and Sports, the staff present here, the permanent secretaries, and all other staff of the Ministry of Youth and Sports. Madam President, I also take this opportunity to say to the young men and women of my community, Mountrich, that when I stand here, I represent you proudly and boldly, and I represent what our future can be. I represent the change that our community so desperately needs and will eventually see. So, Madam President, I want to remind this honorable house that this administration, that this government, led by our youthful Prime Minister, who takes pride in young people's future, a testament I am to that, Madam President, that we are investing in our youth. We are investing in our communities and our nation's future. Madam President, This is why I stand in full support of the 2025 estimates and expenditure budget. Madam President, to those who claim otherwise, I handed you a spare key because, Madam President, context is always key. Thank you, Madam President.
I thank Senator Civil Francis for her props and most importantly for her presentation, her oral presentation. And let me just say that I'm happy to hear reference to what you think, what you plan, and what you anticipate this budget can accomplish in the coming year. And I remember I'm presiding, I'm not participating, so I make a comment that it would be interesting in the context of your presentation to hear whether or not you or future speakers think that the allocation of 44.7 million in the first instance for recurrent expenditure for youth and another 24 million for capital, whether you think that
it happens to all of us. Low on cash and in need of money right away. Play Instacash Monday to Sunday and there are no draws.
So what you saying? No numbers to choose from?
Nope.
And no draw sessions to wait on?
Nope.
And we can play it anytime and any day?
Yep. Including Sundays. Instacash. Ask for it by name and choose from a wide variety of games as low as $2 and win instantly. It is fast, it is easy to play, and you win cash right away. Must be 18 years or older to play. NLA, making your dreams come true.
Well, good morning, players, and welcome. It's time for the NLA's Daily Pick 3 with multi-X draw for today, Thursday, the 20th of March, 2025. I am Lexan Fletcher, your draw hostess for this morning, and joining me is Ms. Aaliyah Malcolm. She is representing RSO Company Limited accountants and advisors. Of course, Ms. Malcolm is here to ensure the games are conducted in a fair and accountable manner, and the game balls have not been tampered with and are within industry standards. Here's a quick reminder, as always, with the Pick 3 game, you can bet as little as $1 on inline, mix, and pair tickets, and from $2 on backup tickets. Let's find out what the winning numbers will be for this morning. It pays to play. Good luck to you. Check your tickets. First up is 4. Second 7. Final is 8. And it's time to recap. Double check your tickets. First up was 4, the second 7, final 8. If you're a winner, congratulations to you. If you've got your tickets for multi-X for this round, good luck. And the winning multi-X ball is free play. That's free play to our winners for this first round. Congrats to you again. We also had 19 winners from last evening's draw with a total payout of $2,720. Well, do stay tuned. Up next is Playway with multi-X. See you soon. And welcome back once again. It's time for the mid-morning draw for Playway with multi-X for today, Thursday, the 20th of March, 2025. I've got Miss Aaliyah Malcolm join me once again. She's here representing RSO Company Limited accountants and advisors. Now, don't forget, with the Playway game, all you got to do is bet as little as $1 up to $10 or in increments on any number or dream symbol of your choice and get to win 24 times the amount you bet. That's $24 for every dollar spent. Let's find out what the winning Playway number will be for this morning. Value your dreams. Win your way with Playway. Good luck. Playway number is 35. That's 3535. Dream symbol is Crapple. If you are a winner this morning, congratulations to you. And if you placed your bets on MultiX, good luck. All right, and the winning free play. To our winners, congrats again. We also had 262 winners from last evening with a payout of $18,600. Well, do stay tuned. Hope you got your tickets for the final one. Cash for a draw with MultiX is up next. See you then. And welcome back once again. The final one for this morning. It's a cash for draw with MultiX for today, Thursday, the 20th of March, 2025. As a reminder, I've got Miss Aliyah Malcolm with me this morning. She's here representing RSO Company Limited, accountants and advisors. Now, when playing the cash for game, you can bet as little as $1 on most of the bet types, with the exception of backup, in which case you bet $2. So hope you placed your bets. It's time for me to select the winning numbers for this morning. It's more plays, bigger prizes. Good luck. All of course, if you have your tickets, you check them now. First up is 6, second 4, third one, final, and the final is 9. And you know the drill. I'll recap, you double check your tickets. First up was 6, the second 4, third 1, final 9. Congratulations if you're a winner. And let's move on to MultiX. Good luck. And the winning MultiX ball is 3X. That's 3X. If you're a big winner this morning for this round, congratulations to you. We also had 4 winners from last evening with a total payout of $800. Congrats again. Don't forget to get your tickets for midday round, and do continue to support sports culture and nation building. Good day to you.
What if you had a choice? A choice of joining a line or a choice of making your purchases online? What would you choose? While you ponder on that, the National Lotteries Authority has provided another purchasing option. All their games are now available online. Yes, Grenadians, from wherever you are, purchase your favorite daily and jackpot type games using any electronic device. Register on the NLA's website at www.nla.gd. Top up your account and enjoy online lottery gaming at your convenience. We're taking shopping comfort up several notches, but the choice is yours. Join a line or buy online. NLA, make your dreams come true.
Madam President, I rise today not out of ceremony, my dear friends, but out of duty. Duty to the healthcare workers exhausted and overworked in our underfunded system. Duty to the young woman full of potential but lacking opportunities. Duty to the families who are struggling to make ends meet due to the rising cost of living and with no hope in sight. Duty to our fellow brothers and sisters who, after being devastated by Hurricane Beryl, is still under tarpaulins and tents 9 months later. Madam President, this is the lived realities of our people, well, except for a select few. I rise because this budget must reflect their needs and the needs of every fellow Grenadian who all long for tangible developments, and I hope we can all agree on that. Madam President, before I continue, allow me to extend a warm welcome to the persons in the gallery, especially our students, welcome, as well as those tuned in online. And I will start where the pain is most acute, healthcare. Because when a nation's healthcare system fails,
everything else crumbles. The family suffers, the workforce suffers, productivity suffers. Therefore, it is imperative that health is a priority. In fact, I must first commend this administration, and I'd like you to give yourselves a round of applause. And I know some may wonder why. Well, I must give you credit where it is due. They have truly mastered the art of grand announcement with little to no follow-through. They have perfected the skill of making mediocrity look like an achievement. And of course, their talent for overspending on travel and entertainment for themselves while underspending in critical areas for the people of this country is nothing short of deception, Madam President. And to go further, Madam President, if those trips brought significant financial benefit to this country, then this would not have been a remark in my contributions here today. In the 2024 estimates of revenue and expenditure, under the caption Strategic Overview, health and wellness was listed as the first strategic priority area for this administration. Number one, I know my friend says she wants to hear 15, but you were listed as the number one strategic priority area for this administration. That is health and wellness. But Madam President, let's fast forward to the 2025 estimates of revenue and expenditure. Under the same caption, health and wellness has not been demoted to priority number 3. That to me is deeply troubling. And this is because in 2024, when health and wellness was listed as the number one priority, we saw nothing happening in the Ministry of Health. Nothing, Madam President. And the evidence is blatant. So in 2025, when we see health and wellness demoted to number 3, this is an indication that we are going from 0 to negative. And this is very concerning. So, Madam President, how can this administration claim to be one that truly cares for its people, when by their own admission, they told the nation that the needle hasn't moved in healthcare? This sends a chilling message to the nation and blatantly tells us that the numbers on this paper here today means nothing to this administration. I'm sorry to have to say this, but this is what it shows. Because the very commitments made in 2024 were just words, with no action to back it up, no follow-through. Nonetheless, I will still delve into the numbers, and in my contribution, I will round off figures. Madam President, let us talk about the cold, hard facts, because the numbers don't lie. In 2024, this administration approved $122 million for health, and yet 24 million was left unspent. The year before that, 27 million was left unspent. So there is no excuse for not having had progress over the last 2 years. They had the money. It was approved in the budget, and yet not spent on critically needed services. That is 51 million total over 2 years. And I see all of them have their heads down. So I ask this administration, where is that money and why wasn't it spent? 51 million that could have been used to buy essential medication. 51 million that could have been used to repair or upgrade our health facilities. 51 million that could have been used to hire doctors and nurses so that our people don't have to wait hours in the emergency room or months for a surgery. Madam President, this 51 million is not just a number. It is a lost opportunity for our people. It pains me to say this now, and this makes me very emotional, but I wouldn't be surprised, Madam President, if some have lost their lives due to that. And now, we have yet another proposed budget for healthcare. And I cannot stop but wonder, what will be done differently this third time around? And it seems that this administration has a pattern. One that places optics over outcomes. One that underspends in critical areas and travel with nothing substantial to show for these trips.
Yeah.
Madam President, let's take a closer look at the 2025 budget allocations for health under Vote 50. This year, the total allocation for the health sector stands at $159 million, with $94 million allocated to recurrent expenditure and $64 million to capital expenditure. At first glance, one might say, well, the budget has increased. But let's break it down, because the picture is not as pretty as they want us to believe.
Correct.
In 2024, the approved recurrent expenditure for health was $100 million, but only $88 million was spent, despite glaring and urgent need for better healthcare services. The $12 million that were left sitting there was not enough in the first place to resolve the severe shortages in medical resources and staffing. And now they come in 2025 and decrease the allocation for recurrent expenditure by $6.2 million. When compared to what was approved in 2024. Madam President, this does not even cover for the shortfall of the previous 2 years. So how is that improvement? Madam President, and for the benefit of the youths and everyone in the gallery, permit me to explain what recurrent expenditure is. Recurrent expenditure covers critical, non-negotiable, day-to-day expenses that keep our healthcare system running. It includes social benefits for those in need, salaries for doctors, nurses, and other healthcare workers, employee allowance, training and continuous education to improve healthcare delivery, maintenance of our hospitals, medical stations, and health centers, provision of essential medical supplies. Madam President, as I said earlier, the numbers don't lie. The budget tells us, yet again, that healthcare is not a priority for this administration, as evidenced by cutting the very budget that ensures our hospitals are staffed, our health centers have resources, and our people have access to the care they need. Tell us, who does this help? Is it that this administration no longer intends to provide medication for the poor? Is it that they no longer intend to make healthcare accessible to the most vulnerable? Is it that they no longer intend to correct the staff shortages? Madam President, I stand here right now, and I will list some additional facts. And I invite my colleagues on the other side to clarify or even verify some of them if they so desire. If someone comes in with a life-threatening condition, like a heart attack, for example, using that as an example, the hospital cannot confirm the diagnosis. Because a basic blood test, which is essential for confirmation, is simply not available. Let that sink in. Just a couple of weeks ago, I got a call from a friend, Madam President. She was frantic, she was desperate, because her loved one was in that exact situation. And do you know what broke my heart? Not just the fear in her voice, Madam President, but the cruel reality that in 2025, with an administration that claims to prioritize healthcare, we are still gambling with people's lives over something as basic as a blood test. Any given day, the lab is functioning at reduced capacity due to not having the test or reagents, or due to a broken machine. Basic tests are not available. Patients are forced, Madam President, to borrow money to pay for private labs out of pocket. And after all that, they must still pray that they have enough money left to buy medication they need because the hospital has run out. 2 out of the 5 dialysis chairs offering life-saving treatment to our citizens battling kidney disease are not functional and have been done for months. There are medical stations that are just open once per month because of staff shortages. A number of community health centers, or facilities I should say, because they include medical stations as well, cannot be reached because the landlines don't work. Let that sink in. Imagine you cannot reach a medical facility because the landline not working. How can we call this a functioning healthcare system? Nurses who want to advance training are left without opportunities, yet this government, in the other place, boast about training a handful of staff. Yes, it is better than nothing. But let us be real. It is grossly inadequate. And let me remind this chamber, some of the achievements listed in the other place began under the previous administration, the New National Party. So I ask, what has this administration done for healthcare? Madam President, our doctors are being held hostage by bureaucracy and intimidation. Their morale is at an all-time low. I will echo a shared sentiment of many healthcare providers. They said to me, it feels like if the Ministry of Health is at war with us. The ministry employees are saying that the ministry is at war with them. How do you expect them to work without tools and supplies? They are not magicians. They are one of our most valued resources. Madam President, it is very painful to speak about what people experience as healthcare services. Let me give you the most recent example. As recent as a few hours ago, there was an emergency transfer last night from Princess Royal Hospital with a patient. The General Hospital has been informed of the transfer. Madam President, the boat took an hour and 45 minutes to get down to St. George's. On arrival at around 12:20 a.m. this morning, there was no ambulance waiting to receive the patient. Mind you, this is an emergency transfer. Madam President, after several calls by the nurse who accompanied the patient, still no ambulance. Members of the Royal Grenada Police Force at the Central Police Station, after recognizing for some time had passed and no ambulance, they came and inquired and also placed calls to the hospital to follow up on the patient transfer. Madam President, when water more than flour, someone, together with the police and the nurse, suggested using a private vehicle to transfer the patient. As they were about to do so, the ambulance was seen coming, arriving there at 1:10 a.m. Madam President, from 12:20 to 1:10, almost an hour waiting. And what was even more worse, the ambulance came with the driver alone. No nurse to receive the patient. The nurse from Carriacou has to now get into the ambulance and go to the hospital, which now further delay the departure of the chartered boat back to Carriacou. Madam President, these are the experiences of the people of Carriacou. It could have been any one of us on that boat. That is why it is so scary about the issues that confront this healthcare system. Madam President, this is the sad reality. Is this what we call a functioning healthcare system? Is this a transformation agenda? It has been 3 years with nothing to show for it. And while our hospital run out of medicine, while our lab shelves have no reagent to run vital tests, while equipment is down for prolonged periods, while our patients wait months for surgery because there is one anesthesiologist, while our healthcare workers cry out for help, this administration had 51 million at their disposal over the last 2 years and did absolutely nothing. Madam President, this administration is talking about a new hospital. Let me be clear. A new hospital is an asset for any country. It is a great strategy to have for the long term. But what about the short term? Tell me. Let me also be clear when I say that a hospital is not just a building. If we are only thinking about the hospital as a building and not a healthcare system as a whole, then we are going nowhere. Right. This trend of missing the now and thinking in a unidirectional manner, while patients are literally suffering before our eyes today, is a lack of planning and foresight that we see time and time again from this administration.
No vision.
If you do not ensure we have specialists to treat our people, medication to heal them, diagnostic tests to detect diseases early, and adequate insurance ensuring access for all, then all we are doing is building a monument. Our people do not want a monument. They need a functioning healthcare system. They need their lives to be saved. For this project to come to fruition, I asked my colleagues on the other side of this chamber to kindly indicate the source of funding for the completion of this new hospital. Not for phase 1, but for the completion of the new hospital, since we are talking about hundreds of millions. My colleague on the other side, the mover of the motion, in his contribution, said that they are thinking about it to the end. So clarify for me, where is the funds coming from for the completion of this project? Not for phase 1. Do you intend to take more loans and plunge this country into further debt? Tell me. That's the only time I heard a comment from my colleague on the other side, when I was stressing all the deficiencies, you know? So he agreed to borrowing more money and plunging the country into further debt. Madam President, I want to put on record in this honorable House that I see no problem with backing down for the concept of a new hospital at this time and strengthening what we already have at a fraction of that cost and with instant benefits for our people. Madam President, I want to draw your attention to some disturbing numbers as it relates to our healthcare facilities. Line item, upgrade of health facilities. 1 million budgeted for health facility upgrade in 2025. We must not forget, in 2024, 1 million was approved for health facility upgrade. Only 175,000 was spent. Is the million for all the health facilities, or is it for a specific facility? Is this administration aware that we have 30 medical stations, 6 health centers, the General Hospital, Princess Alice Hospital, Princess Royal Hospital? Because if it is for all the facilities, then it is clearly not enough. And yet we are still not spending it. Line item, refurbishment of buildings. 300,000 is budgeted for the refurbishment of buildings. In 2024, 700,000 was approved. Only 478,000 spent. Which buildings? Can this administration give this honorable House a breakdown of the buildings that were refurbished in 2024? Line item, repair to Carlton House. In 2024, 500,000 was approved to re-establish Carlton House, a facility for persons suffering with substance abuse. $0 spent. Are you abandoning Carlton House and the right against substance abuse? Or is the 1 million budgeted in 2025 for the Maribor Rehabilitation Center intended to replace Carlton House? Please provide some clarity regarding this and give some details on the services that will be provided with a Maribor Rehabilitation Center and a timeline for completing this project. Line item, smart upgrade to hospital infrastructure. In 2025, 100,000 is budgeted for smart upgrade. Let's not forget, in 2024, 400,000 was approved, $0 spent. What happened there? Where has this money gone? Was it reallocated? Line item, reconstruction of Guelph Health Center. In 2025, 700,000 is budgeted for the reconstruction of Guelph Health Center and to restore the former building that was temporarily used during the health center construction. Last year, 700,000 was approved for this, Madam President, $0 spent. Madam President, I must raise a serious concern about the 700,000 allocated for the reconstruction of the Guelph Health Center. This is a new building. It is not an old, crumbling structure needing reconstruction. In fact, it was built less than 5 years ago. So if you intend to restore defects, then say so. Why name that line item reconstruction? Be transparent.
I'm building nothing.
Madam President, we need transparency. This government must explain how they are spending the people's money. Also, why is the Guelph Health Center not operating in its full capacity? It is my understanding that equipment that has been donated have gone missing. Where is the missing equipment? Line item, health centers and medical stations maintenance project. Madam President, while our health centers crumble, this government allocated a mere $150,000 in 2024 for health center and medical station maintenance. Out of that, only $48,000 was spent. Now in 2025, the same $150,000 is budgeted for maintenance. Let's break this down. As I mentioned before, we have 30 medical stations, 6 health centers. This means $150,000 divided by 36 facilities. This equates to $300 per month per facility. Madam President, $300 per month is supposed to maintain an entire health facility? What can $300 per month do in today's economy? Probably buy a can of paint. I don't know. Because I know painting is a thing for some. No. This has to be a gross miscalculation. But let's entertain another possibility. Maybe, just maybe, there is another allocation hidden somewhere else in this budget for the exact same thing. And if that's the case, then why is this administration double dipping? Madam President, this is not a serious investment in healthcare infrastructure, and this 2025 allocation clearly shows us that. And I'm going to now move to chronic diseases. Madam President, let us talk about chronic diseases. Line item, National Non-Communicable Disease Control Program, which is supposed to tackle the main cause of death and disability in this country. The 2025 budget allocates a mere $125,000 for this. To put this into perspective for everybody here today, or as my good friend on the other side will say, context. Non-communicable diseases are chronic diseases and include conditions like diabetes, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, heart disease, cancer, asthma, and the list goes on and on. Based on health data from World Diabetes Federation in 2021, 1 in 7 adults, that is 10,000 adults in Grenada, has diabetes, and these numbers have since increased. Based on that data for diabetes alone, mind you, I listed a few chronic diseases, not even all. If we estimate that at least 60,000 people at some point in the year need chronic disease management, this allocation translates to a shameful $2 per person for the year.
Shameful.
$2? $2 per citizen for the year? Can you think of anything that costs $2 a year? A year? And while this administration offers $2 per citizen per year, they have somehow found over $18 million for the so-called beautification and transformation program, overspending by $6 million. I will leave that for you to ponder on. So let me ask, am I missing something? Is there another allocation tucked away somewhere in this budget, specifically for chronic disease management? If so, I stand corrected. And I invite this administration to point me to that line item, because I would love some clarity. And if not, then let's call this what it is: misplaced priorities, lack of vision. Or I wonder if this is what transformation is all about. Madam President, if this administration is even remotely serious about health and wellness, they must increase this allocation, because chronic diseases are not just numbers on a page. They are the reason people are in our hospitals, in our clinics, and struggling to survive every day. And if this administration does not see this as a priority, then perhaps my friends on the other side can explain how this budget treats healthcare on a whole as a priority. Medication. Madam President, I'm not sure if you're aware about the OECS PPS pooled procurement system, but I think it's my duty to explain to everyone. This is an arrangement where OECS countries collectively purchase medication and medical supplies in bulk to secure lower prices and ensure adequate distribution across member states. It is intended to be a cost-effective way to keep essential medication available and available to all. I think that it is necessary to explain this so you can understand, according to my friend, the context in which I am addressing this line item.
Yeah, big word for them.
I would like to draw your attention to page 851 for this line item. In 2024, this administration approved a mere $12,500 for this program, and not a single dollar was spent according to the budget. These are the figures presented to us, unless this budget have numerous errors, I don't know. Now, in 2025, the budget has an allocation of $112,500. Let's put that into perspective, or my friend will say context is key. So let me give you some context. In 2024, this administration allocated the equivalent of 1 cent per Grenadian for essential medication and supplies. Now in 2025, they have increased this to just $1 per Grenadian. Context is key. So here is the context. Madam President, this is not only an insult, but I do believe that you all will agree that this is far from addressing the pertinent problems in healthcare. How does this government expect to adequately stock our hospitals, health centers, and pharmacies with life-saving medication with just $1 per citizen? Really? This underfunding explains the empty medicine shelves in our hospitals and dispensaries, the increased burden on the healthcare system as untreated conditions escalates into emergencies, the overcrowding and casualty as preventable diseases go unmanaged due to medication shortages. If this administration had properly allocated funds and utilized the OECS PPS program, our hospitals would not be facing medication and medical supply shortages to the degree and length at which it exists today. And that is a fact. And this is an obvious failure, Madam President, of identification of what are the priorities in healthcare. They cannot even identify it. So how can you remedy it? Madam President, let us now turn to the handling of grants. Grants are not loans. Am I correct? Are they loans? They are given to governments to support critical programs that directly impact the people. And they do not have to be repaid. Am I correct?
Correct.
All right. I draw your attention to page 850, capital expenditure by source of fund. In 2024, this administration approved $2.1 million in grants, but only $500,000 was spent. This raises critical questions. Did this administration send back the $1.5 million to the grantor because they failed to spend it on critical healthcare initiatives? Or is it that they failed to secure the state grants they budgeted for? I would like to have some clarity in this regard. Madam President, this is unacceptable and indefensible. While our hospitals run out of essential supplies, this administration failed to use $1.5 million in grant funding. While patients are being turned away because of lack of mattresses on beds in some of our wards, $1.5 million was left unspent in grant funding. How hard is it to use money that you don't have to pay back in areas where it is needed? Madam President, I would like to hear from this administration the steps that will be taken to prevent this from happening again in 2025. In democratic countries, governments are held accountable, no? Last time I checked, we are a democracy, but sadly, the lack of accountability will continue to lead us further south. Madam President, while essential areas on healthcare continue to suffer, this budget includes vague and questionable allocations that raise serious concerns about transparency and accountability. We see $1.5 million allocated for focused succession planning, yet there is no clear explanation of what this entails. Similarly, $300,000 has been earmarked for capacity building campaign. But is this money being spent on actual workforce development? Madam President, we need mattresses in our hospitals. We need reagents in the labs. We need medication on our shelves. We need landlines to be working. We need doctors and nurses to be taken care of. We need staff shortages to be bridged. We need the backlog of surgeries to be taken care of. We need those things today. In fact, we needed it yesterday. Speaking as a medical doctor and public health specialist, this healthcare budget needs to be revisited and restructured in view of all the things mentioned earlier, so that it can be impactful on the ground, failing which we will be sitting here in this very chamber, hopefully in 7 to 8 months from today, repeating the same outcry. Mark my words. Madam President, this is not an exhaustive list I have mentioned. There are much more issues that need addressing. But in the interest of the time allocated for my contribution, I am compelled to move on to the next topic. Youth and sports, vote 19. Madam President, you know what resonates at this time in Grenada? It is the reality that talent is everywhere, but opportunity is not. That is what resonates. Not context is key. Across our Tri-Island states, young people brim with potential in the classrooms, on the fields, in the workplaces, in this very house. Look at all the students we have here today, in their communities. Yet, this budget does not meet them with the opportunities that they deserve. In fact, I see a harsh blow being served. Before I go any further, I would like to address my fellow young woman on the other side of the aisle. My colleague on the other side said, in a lot of words, that youth is an area that is over-budgeted. Her words, not mine. Over-budgeted. To make an excuse for the harsh blow we see in the 2025 budget. But, Madam President, we on this side deal with numbers. And in 2025 budget, on the vote 40, we saw over 12 million in overspending in the division of youth. So if according to my friend on the other side, this is an area that is over-budgeted, how do you explain the overspending? Tell me. I really want to know. You know what this key she distributed is for? It is to lock the door on the facts. So, Madam President, permit me through you to return this, where is it? On the other side. Because we here will not hide the facts. So permit me to return it, please.
I agree.
Which is that we see a 40% cut in the division of youth from what they spend in 2024. And we see a 30% slash in the division of sports. Madam President, what message does this send to the young people of this nation? To the students in the gallery here today?
Correct.
Where is the government's commitment to youth empowerment, skills training, and job creation? Job creation. How does this administration stand there and try to justify gutting the very programs like the Imani and my friend had a monologue on it, and others that serve as stepping stones for our youth to build a future? Please, do show this honorable House how is that contributing to the long-promised transformation beyond lip service?
They ain't talking about that again.
And I understand they no longer talk about the transformation. Madam President, my colleagues on the other side seem to be assessing and reading what the previous administration has done for the last 3 years, rather than acting. I am sure she may be needing the lenses soon that she walked in here with today. Let me say this, and I will quote from the member on the other side, because what she's reporting is not new. Context is key. If you haven't taken no new applicants into the program, how would you see an increase in the numbers? Tell me.
Charles, I believe, please pause. Senator Sybil has requested the floor. What is it, madam? Point of order? Microphone, please.
Madam President, I stand on a point of clarity.
Proceed.
Through you, Madam President, I would like the honourable member, Dr. Senator Charles, to please provide proof to this honourable House at which point during my speech I mentioned, and she said, the honourable member said, and I quote, that the budget for the Ministry of Youth or for the youth of Grenada is over budgeted. If that cannot be provided, Madam President, I would like for the honourable member to please retract the statement and stop misleading this honourable House.
Thank you. Senator.
Madam President, this is not a point of clarification, and I will not yield. I will continue with my debate, if you so permit me.
What did you say about the point of clarification, your question?
I said, this is not a point of clarification, and if you would permit me, I will not yield. I will continue with my contribution. In the interest of time, I have 20 minutes left, and I still have a lot more to say.
It's a point of information. Are you saying you stand by your statement?
Correct.
Yes, Madam President.
Proceed.
Thank you. And let us be clear, when it comes to sports, it is not just mere games. Sports is an ethic. Sports is a culture. It is a catalyst for change, a force for national pride, and a vehicle for economic mobility. When we cut sports funding, we don't just take away a ball or a field. We take away scholarships, international exposure, and professional coaching. Access to sports is not limited to youths, Madam President. It is for everyone in different age groups. It positively impacts our health. So when we cut budget in those areas, we are directly impacting health. Does this government not realize that sports is also a powerful tool in crime prevention, community engagement, and national development? Does it not recognize that every dollar invested in sports is a dollar invested in keeping young men and women healthy and away from the dangers of crime, drugs, and violence? Madam President, allow me to be frank. This is a policy failure, another missed opportunity, and a betrayal of our young people's future. This administration is one of rebranding, not innovation. If this administration was serious about youth development, it would invest, not divest, in their future. But instead of innovation, all we see in this budget is rebranding of old programs, repackaging with new names, but with the same NMP foundation.
PR.
Let's talk specifics. The Empower program, started by the New National Party, designed to provide young men ages 18 to 35 with self-empowerment, holistic development, skills certification, and employment opportunities. In 2025, 3.5 million has been allocated. But in 2024, the approved allocation was 2.5 million, and only 1.1 million was spent. Only 1.1 million was spent. You can look at them, or should I repeat these numbers? Madam President, where is the accountability to our youths? I challenge this government to provide answers. How many participants enrolled in the Empower program in 2024? How many completed the program? How many secured employment and started businesses after completing the said program? You cannot claim to champion youth while underspending on youth programs and then turning around and cutting funding. Let us not forget, this is a nation where youth unemployment remains high. The medium-term fiscal framework report exposes this truth, and it goes further to tell us that our young women face higher unemployment rates, 15.8% compared to 7.2% for men. The highest levels of unemployment existed among those up to age 24. Yet, where in this budget is the bold, decisive action to address this? Where is the structured investment in skills training and innovation to equip young people for today's economy? Madam President, our young people do not want handouts. They want opportunities, and they need to be truly empowered. They want to work, they want to build, they want to contribute. But what they have been given instead is a budget that shrinks their prospects, slashes their opportunities, and stifles their future. The youth of this nation are watching. Madam President, I wonder how they will respond while hearing this discussion. They will remind us very soon of this very discussion. Yes, they will remind us very soon. I urge this administration to reconsider.
Thank you, Madam President. Yes, I have requested the floor because, Madam President, I'm standing on a point of order. And the rules of the House indicates clearly that we are not to mislead the members in this honorable House. And Madam President, as requested in my first rising, I asked that the statement be retracted because such statement was never uttered from during my presentation. Therefore, I would like for us to review the Hansard so that this can be clarified, because I do not wish for the young people of this nation to have the misrepresentation and the misconception that their representative is saying that the reduction in the budget is, in fact, a good thing.
Thank you, Senator Civil. The request for the Hansard reporters, take note. And of course, you can exercise your right of reply later on following the presentation of Senator Charles. I'm not sure actually about that because you can only speak once in the budget presentation.
I was wondering.
So that at the time of adjournment, you can come back to it. But I hear your request and that it will be so reflected in the Hansard report that you did not say what you said, what is said you said. Is that it, what you're saying? Mm-hmm. 1 second, everyone. Let me take some information from the Deputy President of the Senate. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Madam President, it's within the right of any member to request a copy of the Hansard for clarity on any matter, what was any authorities in the House. And so whenever that particular statement or comment can be verified, because I believe both members are feeling correct in their responses and their position as such, Madam President. So when you have that answered, you will give a determination as to what was said or what was not said, and whether or not comments could be struck off or maintained as is. So that's basically it. It just the only issue, Madam President, I don't know if the copy will be available at the time of closing, but you can always deal with it at a later date. So, thank you.
Thank you, Senator Cox, Leader of Government Business.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Madam President, I believe that each one of us here has been listening to both senators in regards to what was uttered. And I think it is up to you, Madam President, to rule on the matter at this point in time as to when that will be determined. If it can be determined now before the senator proceed, I think it will be in the best interest of this House and the general public. So I leave it up to you, Madam President.
Thank you. For some guidance here, we are speaking on the Article 35 of the Standing Orders, Article 35, interruptions on a point of order. Now, if Senator Francis is refuting a statement that she's alleged to have made by, she's refuting that claim by Senator Charles, we have to, at least I have to be sure that you did not say that to be able to instruct Senator Charles to remove it from her statement because you did not make it. I haven't seen the, I don't recall your exact words. I have not seen the Hansard. So if you are confident, if you are repeating that you did not make such a statement, then I think it is incumbent on Senator Charles to say she will not, she withdraw reference to that statement if you are sure and we are sure that that statement was not made by you. Senator Charles.
Madam President, I think, we can wait for the Hansard, and when I do see that, or when you do review that, then we can make a decision at that time.
Leader of government business.
Madam President, I would want to suggest that maybe we take a 5 minutes recess and a break, and then we could verify the matter and clarify it now, and then proceed this afternoon.
Thank you, Senator. That was my thought. We need this answer now. Adjourned. Senator Francis, Senator Charles, Senator Adrian Joseph, I see right now at my office. Clerk, send in the Hansard report.